Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Garver. I'm a professor of marketing here at the greatest university on the planet. And Brian Roberts, a dear friend of mine, said, "Hey, would you make us a video on what you do about teamwork in your class?" And so I said, "I'd love to." We're lucky that we have people like Brian at the university. He's a wonderful team member that I've worked with, and I was happy to. So let's get started. All right, so that's me on the right. And that's my daughter. I'm her softball coach. I'm her dad. And we make a really good team. And so I thought I'd start with that part. And by the way, don't forget Otter, the stuffed animal, in the lower left-hand corner too. All right. Hey, so what I want to do today is I want to start off kind of talking a little bit about my background, teaching and learning philosophy. Now, mine's pretty in-depth, but I want to pull out teamwork in that. A couple things. I think if we really want to get after higher order learning, I think teamwork is one of the best ways that we can do that. Also, I believe that teamwork is a skill that our students need to learn in order to survive and thrive in the real world. And so teamwork helps us learn all kinds of concepts in our classes, but it's also a skill worthy of itself. And so it's really important to me that teamwork is a major focus in my class. Now, with that said, if we don't put a concerted effort towards forming teams and managing teams and assessing and all that stuff that we need, we're going to have at least 50% of our teams will be dysfunctional. That was my experience as a new professor here at CMU. And that first semester, I was shocked at how bad the teams were. To the point of I was going to take teamwork out of my class. Instead, I gave a lot of time, a lot of energy thinking about what we need to do in my class to overcome that. The system that we're going to talk about today, we've gone from at least 50% to about 5% of the teams are dysfunctional. I can live with 5%, especially since 95% of the students are usually having what I would consider a great learning experience as a part of being in good teams. So today what we're going to talk about is how did I go from 50% dysfunctional to only 5? All right, so we're going to talk about forming, and about the first half of the presentation, at least, will be on forming. It's really important. It's about getting the right start, and then we're going to talk about the managing, assessing, and kind of holding the feet to the fire or accountability. That'll be the second part. Those in my class, those all kind of work together, so I lump them together for you. So now, before we get started, though, I want to give you a little bit of background on my class. I've been doing the flipped class since about 2007. And that's when Brian and I kind of became buddies. The first class, so every class, they get a YouTube playlist, and it gives them the content, if you will. And then they come to class, and it's all active learning, and 90% is focused on what I'll call higher order learning of critiquing, decision making, and actually doing. The first class is I learn about their expectations. The second class, they watch what I think great teaching and learning is, and we discuss. And then the third class is all about forming teams. So in this third class, they watch a YouTube playlist with I think 4 or 5 different videos from me. And one of them is on here's what great teams look like, and here's what not so great team looks like. We talk about the process of teamwork, or what very similar to project management, and how do we kind of go about doing projects. We talk about how do we confront issues in our team. Right? That's the big one that scares them half to death. But when things are not going well, how do we turn the ship around? There's also there's a book on the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and they've got a YouTube video, and I include that one in there too. So they watch what I think is great teamwork, and then this third class, they come and it's really team building, but we talk about it. The other things that you need to know too is that in my class, I try to structure my class after the real world. And if it flies, if it's good out there, it works in my classroom for the most part, right? A big part of that is competition. Now, I realize that when I bring up competition in education, sometimes competition is a dirty word in competition. And usually people are either really for competition or they're really against it. I am clearly really for competition. If your students are unengaged, if they don't put the effort into that you think they should, if the class isn't as much fun as maybe you would like it, or your students don't think it's fun, try competition. 99% of my students this semester played a sport growing up. Sports by nature are competitive. I have found that if we make class into a game, that it's more fun for them, and I can get 3 times, yes, I just said 3 times the level of work because it's a competition. It fuels that energy. It's like putting gas on a fire in my class. So every day in my class, there's a competition, and they're in their teams. It also brings their teams together, I feel. It's just, my class would be a massive failure if I didn't have competition. So I need to let you know that that's kind of part of being intertwined in my class with teamwork. Now, people are always going to ask me the question, well, how do the girls fare in this competitive world? And I would say that the most ferocious competitors in my class are usually the females, without question. And so is there a gender bias? Females might be more competitive. And I mean that. And it's an awesome part of the class. Now, what are they playing for? What is the competition, right? So every day they come and they compete in learning competition, learning games, if you would. And we keep score, right? So at the very end, if they've got the high score, their team gets out of the final exam. So there's some big motivation. And in the beginning, this really drives them, right? We want to get out of the final exam. But what happens is just this teamwork and bonding, and it's us. Let's come together as a team. Let's win. Takes over, and it is just amazing what transformations you can see. Where it's not so much about the final; it's just about being great, and that's the part that I think I love the most. It was interesting. Last semester, we had these in-class exercises that are worth no points, by the way. My competitions, most of them aren't worth any points. And then the biggest project in my class was worth the most points. I think some teams worked harder on the competitions for no points versus the final project, which was the most points. I know it doesn't make any sense to you, but you better believe that now the final project is also competitive too, because I need to get more energy placed on the final project. That's what competition can do. Okay, let's get into how do we form teams? How do we get started down the right path? So people are always going to ask how many people in a team. I've done 3, 4, and 5. I used to always have teams of 4. I've kind of moved to 3. Why? It's harder to hide in 3-person teams. 4 works pretty good too. I used to be a 4 guy for a long time. 5 or more, I believe there's just too many people can hide. And so right now, 3 seems to be working really well, particularly in my class. There are many different ways that we can form teams. I did it randomly before. I know certain professors will do it by personality type. They'll do it by majors. They'll do it by almost like on the schoolyard, right, where they pick teams. I have found what works best for me is when I let them pick their own teams. And a big part of this is that, you're in control. A big part of my class is trying to get them to take control of their study habits in my class. Take control of your life. Turn it around or keep it going. And a big part of that is this is your team. You get to pick your own team. Take control and start right now. When I did do it randomly and some others, when I assigned them the teams, it was almost like I gave students a built-in excuse of, well, you put me in this team that was unworkable and you did this to me. We don't have that anymore, right? Like this is they're in control of it. And so from that standpoint, when things get rough, they will work harder to get out of it because they know they put themselves into this situation. So some of the best teaching ideas I've ever gotten come from students. And in the first class, I have students describe the greatest classes and teachers they've ever had, and they tell me what the great ones do. And then we talk about, this is what the mediocre ones do. So I try to, emulate the great ones and stay away from the mediocre. And one of the things that a student once told me, as they said, in teamwork, is we had a professor that allowed us to meet everybody and kind of work and try out in teams. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. Well, I stole it and it worked great. And so for the first 2 classes, students meet each other, try each other out in different teams. And so it might look like this. In those first 2 classes, I say, hey, let's discuss what you think great teamwork is, or great teachers look like this. So students would go around, introduce themselves. I'm playing music. When the music stops, they sit down with 4 people that they don't know, and they start working on the exercise that I give them. They work on that for 10 minutes. I said, all right, get up, introduce yourselves, go meet everybody else in the class. I'm playing music. When the music stops, you've got 4 new friends or 3 new friends, sit down and work with them on the next exercise. So we do that for 2 classes. Everybody gets to meet each other. We try to make some fun, kind of what I'll call leadership safari type activities where they're laughing and they're engaged and it's all good, right? They get to try it out. It's a great way to do it. Then the 3rd class is teamwork day. So they watch a playlist, a YouTube playlist of what I think great teamwork is, and then they come in and then they form teams. And this team building day is critical. And I take a whole entire class and devote it to team building. And ever since I've done this, that's when we went from at least 50% failure, dysfunctional teams to a very small number. All right, so what does this team building day look like? First off, they're in their new teams. After they've traded information, they've got their contact information and all of that stuff. We start talking about the greatest teams of all time, right? And so, yes, Miracle on Ice, this team always comes up because individually they didn't have the talent to hang with the Russians, and yet teamwork, hard work and teamwork comes up. And so we'll get people, I let them come up with their own, but this one always comes up. This semester, I actually got the Founding Fathers as a great team, and we talked about what made them great teams. And the general format of it is I'm trying to get team members to share great teamwork looks like this. We then will transition. I say, all right, now look into your own past, look into your own experiences, and think about great teams. What did those great teams do, your great teams, and what did they look like, right? So then they'll think individually for maybe 30 seconds, and then they team up and they share ideas of great teamwork. Then we've got to flip it on its ear, and we got to talk about bad teams, or those teams that, what happened to this team, right? And so Brian probably right now is just high-fiving and laughing because he's a Packers fan, and the Lions, one of the worst football teams in the long history of bad football teams. But we talk about bad teams and what makes them and how do they fall apart, and we do that. All right, so now we've looked at the good, we've looked at the great, we've looked at the mediocre and the not so good. And now what we try to talk to with students in this team building day is problems are going to come up. People are going to miss a meeting. They're not going to be coming prepared. They won't, give you communication when their part's late. What do we do when this happens? And our students at CMU, I don't think are very good at confronting in a way. So we get the teams talking about how are we going to handle when someone comes to a meeting unprepared? How are we going to handle it when things start to go bad? We get the whole team to agree on what they're going to do. And we usually try to come up with a fun way to get them to confront. But everybody knows, and we're all on the same page. So when someone's late, they almost know what the team's going to do. This is one of the most important things I think we can do in this team building day is when things go bad, what do we do? They're prepared for it. Everybody knows, here's the script. Here's how we go ahead. Then at the very end of class, I say the whole class has been devoted to teamwork. They then go away and they need to come up with their own team contract of how will this happen, right? Great teams do this, will bad teams do this, so we won't do that. And then here's our process of handling things when the team starts to go south. Here's what we're going to do. This semester, I had them create videos of their teamwork videos. And Brian Roberts, I sent him 3 of these video contracts. They're fun to watch. They nail teamwork to an essence. But more importantly, it's one of these fun, creative exercises that really brings the team together. And they're proud of their creation. We watch them in class. The very next day, because the next class is about how to make great presentations, and it works in kind of really nicely. And by the way, when a team falls down, and when we have a team in disarray, what the first thing I do is come on in. Let's watch your video contract on what great teamwork is, right? And that's what I do, and try to take them back to when things were good, but it kind of holds them accountable. All right, now we've got the teams off to a great start, and I will tell you, that whole front part is fun, it's engaging, it's very leadership safari type, and we've got most teams get off to a great start. Now what we've got to do, though, is we got to keep the car out of the ditch, right? And we've got to manage it, we got to assess, and we got to be able to hold people's feet to the fire, and I think that is a difficult job for us. but that's part of our job here. So how do we go about doing this? So every class period of mine is an assessment, right? So we do some active learning, and people know if they, what level of work. In some ways, we know every class who was first and what that score was, and every team knows kind of where they rank on that project today. And really what it is, it's that, so every day is an assessment day, but it's their response to that assessment, right? Sometimes we get teams that just want to be great each and every class, and I've seen that. Sometimes we get teams that win out of the gate the first couple competitions, and then they kind of fall apart because they think it's too easy. Other teams start off rough and then get better. But my job, I think, as the professor, as we see the assessments start to roll in, and it's not the 1 week or 2 weeks, but that first couple weeks, and I know which teams are performing high, I know which teams are maybe not performing so well, and then I try to go to teams and encourage them, right? I'll go to the teams that are doing well, and I say, you guys are doing awesome, keep it up, right? It's a quick little feedback that they get from me. I'll go to a team, one of my most successful ones last year was I went to a team that I thought was a high-performing team, but they were performing way below expectations, and I kind of played with them a little. I'm like, wow, I had you guys picked to win this. I just don't think we're operating at a high level. We're better than this, guys. Come on. Other teams, I've tried to get a feel for their personality, for the team personality, and I try to motivate them like a good coach would, trying to get more out of the players. About 3 weeks in, I will do this in front of the whole class. I'll say, all right, we're 3 weeks in. If you're performing great, take 5 to 10 minutes of class time. Let's talk about how your team can be even greater. And if we got room for improvement, let's talk about it. So no matter where their performance is in class as teams, how do we take it to the next level? This is just kind of one of those things I do, 5-10 minutes. It's quick, but it gets them engaged about and get them thinking about continuous improvement and how do we improve it, right? We also talked during this time about, don't put a Band-Aid on it. What are root causes? And address those root causes, and we've tried to get changes in those root causes. And that's one of the things we try to get at through confronting issues. Then 3 times a year, 3 times a semester, I will give them a survey about their team where I ask for qualitative and quantitative data on how the team's working out. These surveys come at a very important point in the semester. So there's a part where there's a lot of work, right? And it's the toughest part of my class, where it's data analysis, and it's tough. At the very end of that section, I give them the accountability survey. Why? Because I know that in my class, if we're going to have a breakdown of the team, it's going to happen in this 3 to 4 week period. And I want to know who took that seriously and who didn't take it seriously, and go from there. So we do have some what I'll call formal measurements of team accountability in those surveys. And during this time too, we're always talking about accountability in the syllabus and in the forming of the teams, and almost on a weekly basis, we're talking about holding people accountable. And they know that in my class that there are consequences for blowing off your team. It's in the syllabus. We talked about it for the first 2 weeks of class. It's up and always running, right? I'm reminding them throughout this process that you got to work. There will be consequences for those who don't. So if there's a bad team and I identify them through the survey, what do we do? I often, I would love to give you, I always do this, but it really depends on the team and the formation of the team and the personalities in the team. Teams aren't working out. The first thing that I do to them is I ask them, have you confronted the issue? Have you confronted the problem? Have you guys addressed this as a team? And if they haven't, I make them get right back in that team and do exactly that. Okay? And then what we try to do is we try to get with these teams and talk about how do we confront issues, right? So here's a cartoon where we got these people just kind of yelling and screaming, and we try not to do that, right? I spend a lot of time in office hours and working with teams about how do we confront problems, and this might be a better if we've got two teammates. How do we kind of resolve these differences? But let's be honest on this. Sometimes we got to have conflict. Sometimes we got to clean the air and talk about the elephant in the room, and so we try to do it, and I try to coach them in a professional manner. But sometimes this is needed, and that's a part of how I do teamwork too. Sometimes will I get involved? Yes. And I generally will ask the team, do you guys want to handle this yourselves, or do you want me to get in there and help with the situation? And sometimes I will get involved. Most times I let them handle it, and I'm coaching from afar. But we got to get at it and fix it, and we got to try and take control of it. Now, I do give them the ability to fire teammates. Again, I'm trying to stay with the real world, and if somebody doesn't show up for meetings and the boss finds out about it, they can get fired for that kind of stuff, or they can get demoted, and I try to give them that control. And by giving them control, people, almost the fact that they have that power, people respect that power and they don't push it for the most part. Now, but do I get people that fail my class because they failed their team? Yes. And what I think happens too is the word gets around, right? I think my reputation is you better do good in teamwork, because that's how you get fired. That's how you have to do the whole project yourself. Let me give you a really quick story, because somebody out there right now is thinking, boy, this guy's kind of hardcore. I had a student a long time ago, and he got fired. And he got fired early on, and his team tried everything, and they said, this guy just doesn't even care at all. So he gets fired. He told me, I'm working hard. No, I knew better. I had him do the whole project himself. He worked individually, and it was an unbelievable amount of work to do this project yourself. His grade was not very good in my class. 5 years after he leaves my class, I get an email from this guy, and he says, thank you for holding my feet to the fire. Thank you for allowing me to get fired. He said, that was what I needed to turn my life around. He said, I've gotten a number of promotions. He said, I was a slacker. Everything they said was true. And when I got fired in your class, it woke me up and told me that I need to change my life. And 5 years later, I'm a different person. I've been promoted all these times, and life is really good. Thank you. So I believe in tough love. I also believe that reputation gets out, which deters dysfunctional teams in the future. So here's the thing, though. We're talking about this 5% of teams, right? And what I really want to focus is if you do teamwork well, and the system that I'm talking about, it's my system, but it works well for me. 95% of our teams have a great experience, right? 95, learning is in high gear. They make friends, they're having fun, and the class can be a really rewarding experience because of this. And so if we do everything right, 95% of them are going to get what I would say a great learning experience. I'll tell you though, even the 5% that don't have a good learning experience, it might be exactly the learning experience that they need. So if I had to quickly recap what I believe is maybe the three pillars, is the one is I devote a whole class to team building, an entire class period. That's how important this is. And they talk about great teams and not so great teams and how they're going to handle problems when they arise. The second one, I think, is that I give them something to do as a team that is fun, that is engaging, that is creative, something that they can all get behind and do almost immediately after forming the team. I think this is something that works extremely well. And then finally is this accountability factor, right? In the real world, we have to hold people accountable. I do this through surveys and then working with teams on how to hold people accountable. And if somebody gets fired, somebody gets fired. We try to stay true to the real world in this. All right. If we do this, I think learning can be in high gear, and I think team learning is one of those things that's absolutely critical. A skill set to learn, but also helps learn other concepts in a team. So that's my system. That's what I do. I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody. Take what you like, take what you don't like. It's your system, but it works for me. Also, I wanted to give you my email address there. If you have something that questions or follow-up questions, I'm always I love talking about teaching and learning, right? It's it's up there with softball, right? And so, anyhow, feel free to reach out to me and contact me, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. So I hope this has been helpful, and fire up chips.